All right, hello YouTube. My name is Alan, and it's that time once again. Let's talk metal. Tonight, got kind of a fun topic. Going to do a deep dive on a compilation album I recently picked up. But before I get into that, I had a couple of thank yous that I wanted to shout out. I recently got a pile of CDs in the mail from Marty, my co-host on the Heavy Metallurgy streams over on the Marty Warren channel. So thanks to Marty for sending some VCLT stuff my way. It was a pretty eclectic box with lots of random things Marty had picked up here and there, just, either didn't care for or just wasn't going to ever get around to checking out. Marty and I talked about these a little bit on one of our recent Heavy Metallurgy streams where we covered what we've been spinning recently. So I'm not going to go through everything in detail, but just a few things to show off kind of quickly. There was a copy of Skid Row's Slave to the Grind, which, as you know, hair metal albums from the early 90s go, is actually a pretty good one. It has a lot of relatively heavy songs on it for a band that had so much radio play. You can make all the jokes you want about how many bad teen bebop magazine covers Sebastian Bach posed for with his shirt wide open, but Skid Row, could grind out some decent tunes, so that was cool to get. There was a Kane Roberts album from 2019 in it. Kane was the guitarist for Alice Cooper on the Constrictor record. Had never heard anything solo by Kane before. There were also several of these kind of new wave of Swedish glam metal bands, Santa Cruz, Crazy Licks, Crash Diet. This was a scene I knew existed but had never checked out. So it was kind of neat to check them out. And some of them are not bad. There's a few of those I will keep. Let's see. This was in the box, a band called Screamer, which I know nothing about and haven't had a chance to play yet. Something on High Roller Records. And one of the hidden gems, band I had never heard of before, but I knew it looked promising once I saw it, Lords of the Trident, with an album called Frostburn. This is on Killer Metal Records. Apparently the band started out as kind of a jokey thing. They're from Wisconsin, and they have funny pseudonyms, like Fang von Rathenstein on vocals and stuff. And the band picture tells you that these are guys who take their role playing maybe a tad too seriously. They remind me a little bit of bands like Lorengard, who, come to think of it, are also a Midwest band. I think they were from Indiana and had a kind of similar shtick. Regardless, on this album, apparently Lords of the Trident decided to get a little more serious about things, and it's actually a very good traditional, leaning into sort of epic fantasy power metal album. It's not reinventing the wheel. There's no virtuoso performances on here, but some of the songs are very catchy. Lead track Knights of Dragon's Keep is everything you need to know about the band. It's epic fantasy stuff, cool guitar work, very much sing along, catchy tracks. Been enjoying this one quite a bit. So this was a cool find in the box. So big thanks to Marty for sending all that stuff along. One other one that I wanted to shout out. I recently did a trade with YouTube member Metal Mayhem 77, whose name is Steve. Steve comments on a lot of videos for folks. He often is in the chat when Marty and I do the Heavy Metallurgy streams on Friday nights. And he had contacted me about doing a trade. He had gotten a t-shirt that was not the right size for him, and rather than send it back, he thought I might like it because it is for Atlantean Codex, which of course I've been known to geek out about just a bit. I've made an entire video about the band a while back. You can check out in my older videos. So yeah, oddly enough, ended up trading Metal Mayhem a couple of albums and a CD for a shirt, which I think is the first time I'd ever traded music for clothing before, but it worked out pretty cool. The shirt is a hair big on me, but I like it. If it's good enough, I'll definitely keep it. It's got tour stuff on the back. So very cool stuff. And Steve was kind enough to throw some other goodies in the box too. I threw in a few extras for fun. He threw in a few extras for fun. So there is a gigantic pile of stickers here that I don't recognize many of the bands, but some of them are cool. They'll probably go on my record trade box I have that I take to record shows with me. So that way, it's just kind of fun to show off some stickers, and anybody walking around can pretty quickly figure out what kind of stuff I'm into. I've been able to make a few good trades that way because people be like, hey, I know that sticker. You looking for heavy metal stuff? Why, yes, I am. Let's talk. Let's see, there's buttons, kind of a license plate thing. Not familiar with this company, but kind of neat. And also a couple of singles. One of them is by a band called Borrowed Time, who wasn't familiar with. It's decent traditional metal. The band just did a few recordings, but the vocalist would go on to join the band Traveler, who of course have had a fair bit of success among the ranks of the new wave of traditional heavy metal the past few years. So kind of cool to hear his earlier stuff. The other one also has it's a split with Borrowed Time on one side and the band Witch Hazel on the flip side. This is the UK band that's been getting some hype in the last year or two. They had an album, I think it was called Pentecost. It came out about a year or so ago. Sorry if I'm a little off on the timing there. Time is weird in the pandemic times. But yeah, so big thanks to Metal Mayhem 77 for the trade. Really cool stuff. Appreciate it a lot. Okay, so on to tonight's main topic. I recently picked up a copy of an old compilation album that I've known about for a long time and just never had got around to picking up a copy. Found it on Discogs for a reasonable price recently. So I was like, yeah, okay, I'm going to go ahead and pick that up. The one that we're talking about tonight is this one, Iron Tyrants. Check this guy out on the cover. Yep, that's that's some 80s Rambo wannabe shit going on right there. I'm going to talk about him a little bit more in just a little while, because with a look like that, I had to figure out, who is that guy? Stay tuned. But yeah, it's an interesting compilation, kind of a funny lineup. So I'm going to kind of pick through it a little bit. A few things that are interesting about the compilation in general. It's on a label called World Metal Records, which if you've never heard of, don't feel bad. I don't think they ever released anything else. They are one of the subsidiaries tied into the Ironworks record label. Of course, famous for putting out a lot of 80s sort of undiscovered metal gems like Jag Panzer. The label was overseen by Dave Richards, also known for putting out lots of variants of several of their releases, different shapes, different colors of vinyl, things like that. And apparently also did a magazine. The deal with this record, and this was a sealed copy I bought. I've already opened it up to play it and all that. Yes, I know, heresy. I opened a sealed record. So I'm not such collector scum that I keep all my records sealed. When I buy them, I tend to open them and play them. So I get points for that. Not such bad collector scum. One thing that was cool about this particular compilation is that it comes with this sort of giant full-sized booklet that includes pictures and a little info about each of the bands featured on the comp. So that's what we're going to sort of work through here in a minute. But yeah, apparently Dave Richards and a partner had put out a fanzine around 1984 called World Metal Report. A few pictures of 3 issues are shown on the booklet here. And so, yeah, just, yet another sort of, side gig going on with Dave Richards and his underground metal empire. The compilation album itself is pretty straightforward looking, nothing too fancy on the labels. But yeah, the booklet's an interesting source of information about these bands, because there's not many bands on here that went on to, fame and fortune. But there are some that have funny little footnotes in history that a member went on to something else here or there. And as I kind of picked through, it's just like, no way, I know that. Oh, so that's where that person came through. So yeah, we're going to walk through band by band what you can expect if you also decide to track down a copy of Iron Tyrants, which in true Ironworks fashion did also come on a picture disc. Again, Dave really liked putting out all those different variants of even his compilation album. So let's focus in on the booklet here. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. That would be a bit much. There's a very funny intro blurb here, though, that begins, 1984 will go down in history as the year of the Metal Wars. Blah, 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 blah. And basically goes on to talk about how there's so many bands that are coming out. And yeah, bands surrounded with media hype only to be disappointments. And yeah, this is not to say that the entire metal scene is overrun by posers and so-called heavy metal bands. The scene has given birth to many great bands, and more importantly, soon great heavy metal bands. Heavy metal will never die. So, if you're wondering, just how long has all this, shtick about true metal and death to posers and all been going on? Right here, it was being put in print as early as 1984. So that whole routine is nothing new. That's been around basically as long as modern heavy metal has been around. So let's see what we can find out about some of these bands. So we got 10 bands to feature. I'm not going to play clips tonight because again, a lot of these bands are obscure. You can find them on YouTube if you want to check some of them out. But yeah, side one begins with a band called Tease and a track called Crank It Out. This particular Tease, which is misspelled Teeze, good for them for spelling their name wrong. They were serious about being an 80s metal band. And you check out the picture and you're like, yikes, that's maybe they weren't so serious about being an 80s metal band. Although I will preface this by saying, again, this is 1984. This is before, thrash and glam have kind of taken over heavy metal and bands have kind of started to split. This is when a band could still get away with looking kind of glammy, but didn't necessarily sound completely like lame-o radio rock. And Tease is kind of a good example of that. The song title is Crank It Out. You probably can kind of hear this song in your head, even if you've never heard a note of this song before in your life. It's, kind of the, rock it out, party at Dude Bro's house because his folks are out of town. So Jumbo's getting the kegger and, we're going to rock out, man. It's a kind of song that if you're in the right mood for it, it's fun. If you're not in the right mood for it, it's kind of, dopey and cheesy. So it's right there. It straddles that line between clever and stupid somehow. Tease did release a single and an album, both around 1984, 1985 timeframe. This picture, I'm pretty sure, is the same one that was used for the cover of both. It was certainly used for the cover of at least one of the two, the single or the LP. So yeah, Pennsylvania band Tease starts it out with an okay song, kind of what you would expect from a band in 1984 that was hoping to make it big and get some airplay and attention. All right, track two, we have a Texas band, Boss Tweed, with a song called Jacuzzi Murders. Maybe the only time I've ever heard the word jacuzzi in a heavy metal song title, album title, or, well, maybe the first time I've heard the word jacuzzi in anything heavy metal before. So, Boss Tweed are shown down here. These guys look a little more serious, a little tougher, and the music definitely sounds that way. While a Texas band, they've got a little bit of that heavier, doomier sound you might associate with Chicago bands from around this era. Boss Tweed never got much official out back in the day. They did make a demo, and they supposedly made an EP, though I've never seen an original copy of it. I'm not sure what the deal is with that. It may have been more like sort of a homemade cassette release thing. Not really sure. I haven't nailed down any definite answers. To make it a little more confusing, I've known about this band for quite a number of years. Somebody sent me a folder of MP3s years ago by the band, but the songs in it, the track lists don't really match up with either the demo that they released or with the alleged EP that they put out. So I'm not sure what to make of that. If it's a lot of unreleased rehearsals and demos that somebody had and trickled through the tape trading and MP3 trading circuits, so I don't really know. Some of the songs are pretty good. Some of them are a little bit lame, so a little hit or miss in the Boss Tweed catalog. They did get the anthology treatment with the rather eye-catching name Die You Bitch. Okay. That one came out a while back. It's not a recent anthology. Let me double check the year on that here. Compilation album, lots of bands. Let's see. Yeah, that one came out in 2011. So it's been about a decade since Boss Tweed got the anthology treatment. I did not get a copy of that. It's one of those I kind of meant to and never got around to picking up. Anyway, relatively heavy track, pretty good. It's not their best. They have some better songs on their demo. One of their best is called Computer is the Beast. It's not their worst song either. Again, they had a couple on their demo stuff that I didn't think were that hot. So this one's kind of in the middle. Not a bad track, and one of the heavier bands on here. Definitely one of them that was worth checking out. All right, on to track 3. We have a band called Possession and a track called Lady in White. This band I have found very, very little information about. There's really not much of anything on Discogs or Metal Archives. So we have this one entry. That's about it. So here are the guys in Position. There we go, getting it lined up. Pretty straightforward looking heavy metal band. They are noted as being from the Chicago area. So all you Chicago metal maniacs out there, if you know more about Possession, let the rest of us know. And yeah, the song Lady in White is not a bad one. It's a little quirky sounding. It has a little bit of a jerky structure, but relatively heavy. Not a bad track, sort of an odd track. The band seemed to be going for a little bit, of a, outside the box kind of sound, but decent enough. All right, that brings us to track number 4, which is by a band called Death Slayer. Slayer is pictured here. I'm pretty sure it was the only band on the compilation that had a female member. The Death Slayer track is not bad. It's, again, one of the heavier ones. Death Slayer did a few demo recordings, but I don't think they ever got a full-length out. I'm double checking notes over here. So let's double check. Yeah, several demos from around 1984, 1985. They later changed their name to Helicon, which, okay, it kind of rings a tiny bell, but there's so many bands that had those, like, Helix and Hele something, that I may just be thinking of somebody else. But yeah, the Death Slayer track here is pretty good. Another decent track, not amazing. It's not life affirming or anything like that, but it's a good track for compilation appearance. This is the kind of stuff you're hoping to find. All right, and then side A closes out with a track by a band called Enforcer. Enforcer did not send in much information, but we know a bit about them because they have gotten the anthology treatment from the folks over at Stormspell. I forgot to grab that one off the shelf. But yeah, Enforcer was a Chicago metal band. They have that very classic Chicago sound from the early and mid 80s. Think bands like Trouble, Warcry, these bands that have a rather doomy tone to their music, but they're also kind of a traditional power metal structure to the songs. So they've got this very heavy aura about them, but they're not slow or draggy doom. They're actually kind of a powered out doom sound. Enforcer material I've all heard before. Very, very good band. This is one of those kind of lost gems of a band that could have put out a pretty kick-ass album if they had stuck around long enough and gotten a chance. So very cool to see that Enforcer, did get this out back in the day. They at least did get an appearance on this one compilation. All right, so something you may be noticing with the pattern too, we got some New York bands, we got some Chicago bands, and we got some Texas bands. And it seems like the lineup for this compilation very much drew on those 3 scenes. So that gets us through side A. Now on to the 5 bands on side B. We start off with a band called Black Star, who doesn't look like they ever did much of anything else. Let's find our picture of Black Star. Let's see. Here we go. The guys of Black Star. I love this dude here in the middle. Got his fists up. This guy is so not looking for trouble, even though he's got the pose. He's he is in over his head. If anybody takes him up on that fight, he is so getting his ass kicked. The Black Star track on here is called To Your Knees. It's a little bit of a slower one, but reasonably heavy. Not a terrible track. Not the best on the album, but not the worst either. There's a funny note with Black Star here. The little bio they have says they're from the Houston area, but the contact address for the band is in Oklahoma City. As looking at a few other sources, it looks like they were indeed a Houston area band. Not sure why they had contact info in Oklahoma City, if they actually had management that was located hundreds and hundreds of miles away across the state line. Houston, down on the Gulf Coast, that's not exactly up there next to the Oklahoma border. I don't know. Life's wacky sometimes. But one of the other little wacky things about Black Star, even though they didn't really go on to do anything else, as far as I can tell, a couple of the members did later join a band called DT Rocks. If you've never heard of them, don't feel bad. Nobody has. Except this guy, because I happen to have a single by DT Rocks that came out. This might actually be early as 90s, if I remember. There's not much info printed on it. This is going for that sort of very heavy hair glam style, but trying to be a little more forceful. It's getting into that more of that maybe Wasp or Guns N' Roses kind of territory a little bit. Both songs on here are pretty good. They're heavier, forceful songs, but they still have one foot in the commercial leaning side of the glam scene. So yeah, it was really cool. And looking up the Black Star stuff, it's just like, wait a minute, those two guys. Yeah, DT Rocks, I'll be damned. So DT Rocks has a history with Black Star of all things. So a cool footnote here on this comp. All right, after Black Star, we have a band called Mesomorph. I'm going to read the little description here because it's funny. They literally, at the top of their page, spell out Mesomorph to make sure you know how to pronounce it, and then they go full on Webster's on you and give you a definition of mesomorph. Characterized by powerful chest and limbs, solid muscle structure, and great strength. And okay, now the literal translation of mesomorph from the Latin would simply be middle form, which, okay, I guess that kind of refers to like the torso area as opposed to the arms or the legs, but it wouldn't imply that they would have to be great strength or anything like that. If you wanted that, yeah, the translation is a little bit off there, guys. You're cheating a little bit. Quirky name for a band. And this is a band out of Syracuse, New York. They went with this goofy name. You might know where this is going, because when you check out the band picture and get it folded over to the right page, let's see. Yeah, these guys were kind of doing the Misfits routine, apparently, of working out and pumping iron in the back of the tour van. Because yeah, definitely pumping the guns there a little bit. So the song, what does their music sound like? Maybe unsurprisingly for a New York band in the early 80s, they've got a little bit of a Rod's influence with the power trio thing here, although these guys definitely are going a little bit more towards a slightly more commercial friendly rock direction. There's some heaviness to this, but this is something that could have gotten some airplay in that day and age also. So again, kind of straddling that line a little bit. Now, with Mesomorph, looking this one up, this led down a funny little rabbit hole. I had been wondering who the big guy on the cover was. And looking at some other pictures of Mesomorph, it turns out, okay, it is definitely the fellow in the middle here, who Stevie Steele, spoiler alert, that's not his real name, but he's listed as bassist and vocalist for Mesomorph, and that is indeed him on the cover. Mesomorph did some demos around this same time frame, 84, 85, but never put out any other product that I am aware of. But Stevie Steele actually carved out a little bit of a career for himself down the road. He ended up going by the probably better stage name of Kane Roberts, and adopted a guitar that looks like an M80 machine gun and played with Alice Cooper. Yeah, it's this Kane Roberts who just put out an album in 2019. Small fucking world sometimes, isn't it, boys and girls? This is what happens when you do your homework, people, and you dig through these weird, obscure compilations. You find the weirdest shit. So yeah, the guy on the cover of the Iron Tyrants compilation ended up being in Alice Cooper's band during the Constrictor era, and went on and done solo albums and stuff since then. Crazy, weird little connection to it. Something else I want to point out about this Kane Roberts CD, now that I've come full circle and made the connection. Yeah, I played this a couple of times. Musically, it's not doing much for me. It's very much meant to be, kind of slightly heavyish rock, but very, very commercial friendly. Probably, like Hot Topic kind of friendly. But it has a lot of guest appearances on it. Alice Cooper does some guest vocals with Kip Winger, Alyssa, does it Glutz? I'm butchering her name, but the vocalist from Arch Enemy has a guest appearance on here. And here's our boy, Stevie Steele, all these years later, from 1984 up to 2019. Still working out, I guess. And yeah, putting this out. The other thing that's really weird and a little creepy about this album, check this out. It's called The New Normal. Somebody, wearing a mask there. The quote unquote single that was off of it that had the guest vocals from Alice Cooper and Lisa White was called Beginning of the End. All of these elements kind of sound familiar to us now, but this came out in January of 2019, about 14 months before the world started locking down due to COVID, wearing masks, getting used to the new normal. And folks worrying that it was the beginning of the end. That's some creepy shit right there. See, this makes me think that while Kane Roberts, aka Stevie Steele, this whole time was going for sort of a Rambo look, that he actually has more in common maybe with Arnold, and that he's some kind of time-traveling cyborg who came back and gave us a coded message that COVID was coming about a year before COVID came. We're through the fucking looking glass on this tonight, folks. So you thought you were just getting some VCLT shout outs and looking at a weird compilation album. And now we've got the tinfoil hat fully on. And I don't know what the heck to make of that. Musically, not my thing, but really weird that it has a tie back to this compilation album, and that it had so many weird little things that seem to presage the global pandemic that would hit barely a year after the album came out. Moving right along. All right, we got 3 bands left to go. There's a band called Teaser. Now, Teaser, first off, you spelled your name right, Teaser. This is the reason that you had absolutely no commercial success or underground notoriety whatsoever. There's a million ways you could have misspelled this. And you chose to spell it, I guess correctly. Does Teaser actually get spelled with an S? I've seen it messed up so many times, I'm not even sure anymore. Regardless, this is not very original. -5 points from your true metal score, Teaser. And let's see, Teaser's another New York band. This track is called Day Zero. Not a bad track, pretty average. Again, it's what you'd expect from one of these bands that's hoping to make it big. It's a little heavy, but in a nice, tame, friendly, you could put us on MTV or FM radio, please, and maybe get us some hype. The only other thing I found about the band Teaser, they had the exact same song appear on the New York Metal 1984 compilation. So may not have had much of a repertoire, or this was just their go-to song for everything being 2 compilation albums. So that's all there is to say about Teaser. Next up, we have the one name band on here. The one band that did go on to make some waves in heavy metal. We have an appearance by Nasty Savage, Nasty Ronnie, and the guys, also the only Florida band on the compilation. And they appear here with the track Unchained Angel, which a lot of folks know and love that track from Nasty Savage's early days. It's one that the Tardy brothers in Obituary mentioned was like an early favorite of theirs when they started getting into heavy metal as kids. So you've got Nasty Savage checking in with a cool song here. Nothing much else to say about them. Folks know the Nasty Savage catalog just fine. And that leaves us with band number 10, which is called Titan. Now, I'm sure it's supposed to be pronounced Titan, but it is appropriately misspelled as Tyton. So your teaser, you lost your true metal street cred points, and this band stole them because they got their name all fucked up the way you're supposed to if you're in a band in the 1980s. So here are the guys in Titan, live action stage shot there. Titan is another Texas area band. And this band did make a couple of albums. They made one in '84 called Castle Donington, and that's also the name of the track that appears on this comp. And they did another album in '87, and I always forget the title of that album. So let's go to the notes and double check. Mind Over Metal was the name of the second album. I don't have either of those albums to show here at this point. Neither of them necessarily did a ton for me, but the Castle Donington one I've heard. It's been a long time, to be fair, but it always struck me as a little bit boring, a little flat. For my money, there are much better bands out there that have just more power, more character to them. It's not that it was a terrible album. It just felt like it was a relatively dull album overall. So, I never heard the second album. So maybe they changed it around on the second album and got their stuff together and did something really cool and impressive. I don't know. But yeah, it is interesting to see them included here. The Castle Donington album has a fan base. There are some folks that are really into those independently pressed, 80s metal albums that really dig the Castle Donington album, and that's absolutely fine. One last footnote on Titan. One of their members did go on to spend a little time in a 90s US metal band called Z-Lot Z. Don't ask me where, but it's actually a band I know. They made this really good little mini album. It's got 6 tracks on it. They did some other recordings in the 90s too that are pretty good. It's a different style. It's got that sort of 90s metal rock sound that you associate a little bit with like Riot albums from the Inishmore era, the Mike DeMeo era and stuff like that. Cool tracks. I like this quite a bit. It's a band I'll talk about in another video at another time. I had no idea that one of the guys in Titan had served some time with Z-Lot Z as well. Now, I don't think he played on that release. I'm not sure he played on any of their releases, but he is listed as a member of Z-Lot Z when you check the mothership. All right, and that gets us to the end of the Iron Tyrants compilation album. So, grades, overall thoughts here. It's got a pretty cool lineup overall. As I've pointed out, a lot of these bands had funny little connections to other projects, and some of them have got some demos or an obscure album here and there. At the end of the day, there's nothing that is mind-blowingly good on here for my money. It's a solid compilation. This is the kind of comp that if you find it randomly someplace and pick it up, you're gonna be like, yeah, there's actually a lot of very cool, very solid heavy metal stuff on here. It's not filled with, a bunch of Poison or Cinderella wannabes. It's not filled with a bunch of, just random, April Wine tracks or anything like that. These are all legit. Quality varies a little bit from track to track, but you are getting something that has, true metal street cred to it. And perhaps that's the best way to say it. It's not the best compilation I've ever heard. There's better ones you can track down, but this one's never been too hard to find. It's not very expensive, and you do get some cool, obscure heavy metal music. So at the end of the day, we'll give it a thumbs up. Glad I finally picked up a copy of it. If you try to track down a copy, do try to make sure that you get the full booklet with your copy. For me, I think that is one of the big selling points, to get the pictures of the band and read the funny little bios. There's a line in the entry by Possessed, or Possession, for example, about, how possession is, let's read one last quote before we wrap this up. Yes, possession. In the savage streets of Chicago, possession set out to enslave their audience. Can't find out anything else about the band, but presumably they had an audience that may or may not have been enslaved. Maybe that's why they didn't go anywhere. They put all their audience into slavery, and then there was nobody left to buy their albums or come to their shows. Probably should have thought that one through a little bit more, guys. Guys, learn from the guys here in Possession. Don't enslave your audience. Not cool. All right. So with that, let's talk metal in the comments down below. What are some of your favorite compilation albums that feature some more obscure, unknown stuff? Bands that never broke very big, but maybe they got an unknown album out, or they got some cool demos, or hey, they were just part of your local scene. You got to see them a bunch of times, and you know that they could rock out pretty good live, even though they didn't get much of a chance to appear on anything except for one or two compilation albums. There are a lot of neat comps like this from the 80s, and I'll feature some more of them in future videos. But for tonight, that's going to have to do it. So until next time, everybody take care, and as always, keep banging your head.